right. We've already had a sort of whole conversation about how this is going to go. It's so wonderful to see you again. Last time Alice was here, she had been in San Diego at a mystery conference, right? And she faithfully followed us over here in order to have a conversation with you. I'm trying to remember how that went. There were a number of British authors. Were you all seduced by the thought of going to San Diego?
Yes, it was really fun. I'm a little bit overwhelmed to see you all. I can see some familiar faces here. Some of you have been here to see me before. It's like coming to see family, actually. It's lovely. This is the last stop on the Beautiful Ugly book tour this year, and I thought I would save the best for last, and I really have. Thank you so much for you all coming out tonight. It's amazing to see you.
That was an incredibly gracious speech, but I am told by her publicist that the other reason she's here, she wants to go to the Grand Canyon.
Shh. There is that too.
So Arizona has many attractions, one of which is, in fact, for the Grand Canyon. Do you all realize that you can put the entire British Isle into Arizona with room left over?
I did not know this.
You didn't?
No.
No, it's absolutely true. Yeah. So the concept of distance is an entirely different thing, right? So anyway, I mentioned to them that we have talked from your cottage in Devon through the stone walls.
We really have. Barbara and I have been doing this for several years now, for several books. I've been to the bookshop 3 times, but on one occasion, I think for rock, paper, scissors, I had just moved into a very old 16th century thatched cottage. And when I say just moved in, I mean there are still boxes everywhere throughout our house. And we were about to do this Zoom event, and I thought everything would be fine. But as soon as we hit go, it didn't work because of the very old thatched cottage walls, which are made of cob. Do you know what cob is here? For those who don't, it's basically mud and straw. So you remember that story about the 3 little pigs and not buying a house that can get... Yeah, I didn't listen to that story and I didn't learn the lesson. So internet can be tricky in a house like that. But we got there in the end, didn't we?
We did. We
had our
persevered.
chat.
It was all wonderful. So I thought we might, for a huge number of these people have never been in the bookstore before.
Wow.
So that is a tribute to you and your own.
Goodness.
I know. So talk a little bit about, before we start, about what's going on in the land of the small screen for your books, or even the large screen.
Oh, yes. So I know that some of you, especially the ones who have been here before, will know that I have a few books that are in production in terms of turning them into TV shows. And I'm so excited to say that the first one has now been filmed and will be on Netflix this summer. I know, isn't it exciting? I keep pinching myself thinking, is it really happening? But in last year, around October time, I got to go to Atlanta and see them filming the show, which honestly blew my mind, to actually see characters who've lived inside my head for years, walking and talking. It was just the most incredible thing. John Bernthal, who you might know from The Walking Dead, and more recently The Bear, is playing Jack Harper. He was one of the first people I saw, and I kept wanting to go up and touch him to sort of see, is this real? Is this happening? Tessa Thompson is playing Anna Andrews, the main female lead in the book and in the TV show. And lovely Jessica Chastain is producing the show. And I confess I was quite nervous to meet her. You know, she's a big Hollywood star. And the guys on set were very kind. They made me a director's chair with my name on. So I had this amazing director's chair with Alice Feeney every day. I took it home. It was tricky to get it in my suitcase. I don't know if I was allowed to take it, but I figured it had my name on it, so it's mine, right? And one morning I turn up, and the chair next to mine magically said, Jessica Chastain. And I thought, oh my goodness, is she coming to set? And they said, yes, she wants to meet you. And so I had this mad panic where I thought, what will I say? Because I don't want to sound like a crazy British author. I want her to like me. And I needn't have worried. But you have to remember there are some differences in the language when it comes to the UK and America. So there's a thing on set called crafty, which I had never come across before, which means they have every kind of snack you can imagine. There's all kinds of sweets. There's all kinds of chocolates. There's all kinds of crisps, or chips, as you guys like to call them. And imagine my reaction when the very amazing Jessica Chastain turns to me and says, now let me get this right, there's some kind of lollipop that you guys have here that when you suck it for long enough, it turns into bubble gum. What's that called? So that's right. So imagine the amazing Jessica Chastain turning to me on day one and saying, I'm not going to try the accent, I love blow pops, do you? If you're not from here, that sounds very rude. Eventually, someone explained to me what it was. You have a Tootsie thing as well. You have all kinds of crazy stuff here. But we bonded over strange confectionery. And I had the most amazing time on set. It was my birthday. They made me a birthday cake. They sang to me. They gave me a friendship bracelet, which, if you've read the book, might not be a good thing necessarily. But I had the most incredible time. And the scripts are great. The cast are great. The crew are great. And I think we're going to have a great show. And I can't wait for you to see it all on Netflix this summer. Thank you.
So you're really seeing the other side, the good side, because for many years you actually worked in media, and there was a wonderful interview with Alice in a publication, and I think I can access it. But tell us about what you did before, because I gather it wasn't nearly as much fun as what you just described.
No, it had its moments, but I was a BBC journalist for 15 years before I became an author. So I was a secret writer. I would write on the train to work, I would write on the train home from work, and it took me almost 10 years to actually get published. And then I wrote a book called Sometimes I Lie, and my life just changed. I suddenly had 15 agents getting in touch, including my dream agent, and things changed for me very quickly. But no, life in the newsroom was very different. It had its moments. I remember being on the red carpet once at Leicester Square, and there was a film called War Horse, and Steven Spielberg was supposed to stop and chat to us, and somehow passed the BBC by. So I had to chase after him. Now, you know those funny ropes you see on those things? You're not supposed to go under, but I did. I chased after him. I got him. It was fine. He winked at me afterwards. I think we're still friends. I interviewed Madonna once in a hotel bedroom in Venice. That was quite fun.
Was she dressed?
She was definitely dressed, and she didn't mention blow pops once. It was so yes, you know, that working for the BBC definitely was very different at times to my job now. I was in the middle of the world's biggest newsroom, and now it's just me and my dog in the shed.
But the other difference is you get to make things up this time around.
Yes, the stories just come from my peculiar brain instead of having to tell the real news. And I think we all need that, don't we? We all need a bit of fiction. We all need stories. That's why I'm sure you're all here, because like me, we need some escape from the real world from time to time. And if we want to have some escape from the real world, why not turn the pages of a dark and twisty book instead?
Murder and, betrayal and all those great things. So, according to the interview, these are not my words, the book spark first came to Alice after a mishap during one of her yearly trips to Scotland. So you've actually written about Scotland before, but this story, tell us about what the mishap was.
I think I'm just in love with Scotland. I go there every year. I either write the books there or I edit the books there, and I think if there is a more beautiful place on earth, I've yet to find it. And so I suppose I keep writing about it, because when I'm not there, I wish that I was. So it means I get to sit in my shed and I get to just invent these stories and go back to this place I'm in love with. But for Beautiful Ugly, this particular story is about a British author called Grady Green. And Grady is going through a bit of an interesting time in his life, where things are a little bit rocky in all aspects of his life, his career, his home life, absolutely everything. And he's waiting for a phone call from his American publishers to find out whether his new book might be a New York Times bestseller. If it is, then things might be good for him. His life might get back on track. The phone rings. He holds his breath. He answers. It's good news. He is actually a New York Times bestseller. He's over the moon. He picks up the phone again to call his wife. She's the person he loves most. He wants to share this moment with her, but she's still driving home from work. He tells her the news. She's over the moon. She loves him. She's proud of him. She's crying tears of joy. And then he hears the sound of screeching brakes. Then there's nothing. He waits. Finally, Abby speaks. She says, "Everything is fine. I just had to stop because there's a woman lying in the road. Now, we've all seen the horror films, right? We've all seen these shows. We know that the answer to this situation is do not get out of the car, right? And that's what Grady tells his wife. Don't do it. But Abby is one of these people who just has to help people. So he hears the sound of her unclicking her seatbelt. He hears the door open. He hears her walk away. And then nothing. 1 minute goes by. 2 minutes go by. 3 minutes go by. He knows where her car is. It's not that far from where they live. He's out. He's running. He finds the car. The car door is still open. Her bag is still there on the passenger seat. Her phone is still there, connected to him. But his wife has disappeared. A year later, Grady's broken. His whole life has fallen apart. He can't eat. He can't sleep. He can't write. He's lost everything. He's lost his home. And his agent says to him, I've got an idea. I've inherited this old cabin on a tiny island in the Scottish Hebrides. I think you should go there. I think you should take some time. Take your dog. Read. Eat. Relax. Maybe you'll be able to write. With no other options, Grady decides to get in his car with the dog and drive all the way to Scotland and get a ferry to the Isle of Amberley, where he sees the impossible, a woman who looks exactly like his missing wife. Dun, dun, dun!
Right. Well, that's all we're going to say. This is Alice, so, trust no one is the best way I can describe it to you. Do you find that you're getting wickeder and twistier as you're writing along? You're getting better at it?
Oh, yes. I'm getting more and more devious, and sometimes I have a little evil cackle just to myself as I do at the end of a chapter. Because the thing is, even when I start, I know what's going to happen. So, yes, it's fun. I loved writing this one.
So, the island, this is not a real place, right?
No, it's just from my strange, twisted brain. But I can see some of you have your copies. At the very start of the book, you'll see inside that there is a map. Yes.
Yes, and you will actually refer to the map. I'll give you a trick that I thought worked well for me. If you photograph the map, you don't have to keep flipping back. You can just keep your phone while you're... No, I'm serious. I love maps. I think maps, when you're dealing with, something like a made-up island or whatever, is a terrific thing.
Exactly, and it's a tiny island. There are only 25 people who live there, and I thought it'd be really fun if readers could see the island and see the geography of the place and see where all the different buildings were, so that when something a little bit spooky might happen, you'd be able to think in your own head, well, hang on, who lives where and who might be close by to where this is happening? But I do remember drawing my map when I wrote the book, sending it off to my very lovely editor and saying, I know I'm not a fantasy author, but wouldn't it be fun if we had a map? So my publishers had a meeting, because publishers like to have meetings, and then my editor got back to me and she said, we've been talking about it, and I do like illustrations in my books. Even in Rock, Paper, Scissors there were pictures of Labradors, because why not? And on this particular occasion they said, okay, you can have your map. And I said, yay! Then they said, but. And I went, oh. And they said, but we're just going to get a professional artist to redraw it. How rude. But I think
they offered them one of those blow pops.
I should have. But didn't they do a great job? I think it looks absolutely stunning. I love it.
I do too. And actually, they're appearing in thrillers. I remember last summer, Brad Thor's Thriller was a complicated thing. And it didn't seem at first that many people would recognize that if you leave Russia, that you can walk across to Norway, because you think that Finland and Sweden are in the way, right? But in point of fact, Norway arches over the top of Sweden and Finland. So in fact, you can walk from Russia right into Norway. So a map was essential to work that out. And, once again, I took a photo of the map, and then I read the book with my phone. You can go down a lot of rabbit holes reading books with your phone open. Right. But in your case, since I knew it was all made up, I didn't, try to verify where it was, anywhere out there. The Scottish Island, any of you watch Shetland? If you haven't watched Shetland, the photography of the island and it's just glorious. And so I sort of thought about, when reading about Amberley, I could kind of see the opening credits to Shetland, where it's just spectacular. Right. And for those of you who might read Anne Cleeves and have read Shetland, she is moving to the Orkney Islands for a new series that's going to publish in September. So I'm hoping there'll be more television, and this time
Oh,
we'll get to see the
I hope so
Orkneys.
too. Anne is a really lovely author in the UK, and we were on a tour together in Denmark once, and our flight was delayed by 5 hours, so we arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning. And Anne is so lovely, and she'll always be one of my favourites, because when we were stuck at the airport, she bought me lemonade and chips. Fries, that's what you call them. Lemonade and fries. She's a really lovely, lovely woman and an incredible writer. So, yes.
No, she truly is. But I was so pleased thinking, I have not made it. I've been to Shetland, but I have never made it to the Orkneys. And I thought, at last, drone photography has absolutely made an incredible difference to television, right? You can watch things even if the plot's not very good because you just sort of drip into the scenery. Not that that will be true of Alice, but nonetheless, there we go. Okay, so you said in your interview, you clarified that Beautiful Ugly isn't one of your naughty books. What do you mean by that?
Well, all of my books are my children, so I love them all, even the naughty ones. And there have been some naughty ones and some well-behaved books. But I would say that His and Hers was my best-behaved book. I wrote that book in 3 months, 3 drafts, 3 months, and then I hit send. Very well-behaved book. None of my books have been that well-behaved since. I've had some books that have taken 5 years.
That was Daisy Darker.
That was Daisy.
Right.
So that was an incredibly difficult book. I do remember with His and Hers, I'd written it because I got stuck on the book that I was writing that year. And so I handed in His and Hers, and it was all great. I went back to the very naughty book, and I could suddenly see what was wrong with it. Then I wrote a book called Rock, Paper, Scissors. And then I went back to the naughty book, and this time I could see what was wrong with it, and I could see how to fix it. But it was a really simple fix in the end. It was just deleting 80,000 words. So it was, a small thing. My books tend to be about 85,000 words. So I still had 5. I wasn't starting from scratch. But the next time when I wrote it, it was a well-behaved story. Same story, same characters, same everything, but somehow it just worked. And that was Daisy. So Daisy was the naughtiest, but I still think sometimes I love her the best.
Well, Visit to Cornwall was it was Cornwall, not Devon,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Was really spectacular. And of course, anybody who's read Rebecca probably heard echoes of Rebecca as it wandered through, right? So if you all look at the cover for the book, you will notice that there's a very interesting typeface. And it took me a while to figure out why it was like that. I don't know whether you want to say much, but it's deliberate. It wasn't an accident in the typesetting room that the type reverses partway through.
Well, firstly, I asked for foil because I like shiny things. And they spoiled me by giving me not just foil, but holographic foil. So it does a whole sparkly thing, which is pretty exciting. And then it was the publishers who had the idea to... I know I'm looking at my own book, aren't I, adoringly. It's beautiful, thank you. They decided to switch round the letters. Don't worry, it's just my dad. No, it's not really. I think to try and convey the fact that in this story, everything is not quite what it seems. So the book is filled with these oxymorons like beautiful, ugly throughout the story. And it's just about that, really. It's just about the way we all present a version of ourselves, I think, to the rest of the world, but that we can be somebody very different when we're on our own. And so, yes, I think everything about the book is to reflect the story and the characters and the journey that they go on this trip to the Isle of Amberley.
So which book was it that you overhauled? I love this. After a book event in Macedonia, not everybody can say they have done a book event in Macedonia if they are an English author. Which book was it? This one, or was it Daisy?
It was this one. We'd already finished it. All the edits were done. It was signed off. It was completely finished. And then there was a 12-year-old girl in the queue at an event in Macedonia last year, and she had all of my books. And I remember thinking, "You're too young to read my books." I was quite worried about her. And she knew them inside out, upside down. And I think I had this moment where I worried about what her interpretation... So I'm editing spoilers in my head as I'm talking to you because I know what happens. I basically didn't want her to think badly of some of the characters in the books. And so I ever so slightly tweaked the ending to an ending that I felt like she would interpret the story the way I hoped readers would interpret the story. I think my readers mean everything to me. Thank you all for being here. But I've been so lucky over the last 9, 10 years. And part of that was down to luck and getting a great agent and finding the best publishers in the world. But I would not still be here now without my readers. So honestly, I love every one of you for being here tonight, for reading my books, because it means I get to keep the best job in the world. But I always desperately, desperately want you to enjoy the stories in the way that I intended. So that's why I tweaked the ending of this one.
I think that's a wonderful insight. And it's great that you had the space to do it, too, because sometimes books are slammed out.
My publishers were not over the moon about the last minute
weren't.
change.
They don't like it when they're all full into production and suddenly the author says, oops. How far in were they when you decided to tweak?
Super close to the end. I remember crying at the printers when we printed Daisy Darker in the UK, and everybody thought it was because I was so delighted with this beautiful hardback they had made of the book. And I was delighted about that. But I think really I was crying because I'd spent 5 years with Daisy. I adored Daisy living inside my head. And I figured that once we'd printed the book, I can't change anything anymore. So no, I'm pretty good normally at once we're finished. But if there's time to tweak things, it's always very tempting.
Are you surprised sometimes what, there was an author who years ago said a wonderful thing to me, which I think is true. He said every book actually is 3 books. The first one is the one the author conceives, and it's like a platonic ideal of a book or a story. You know, it's the book in your head that's perfect. Then there's the actual book that the author eventually writes, with its various, ups and downs and potential warts and so forth. But then the third book, and the one that matters the most, is the one that each one of you reads, and each of you reads a book differently. And so the book, everyone in this room that has that book is going to have a different book, so to speak. Does it unnerve you when people ask you questions sometimes and you think, I didn't really write that, or that wasn't what I meant?
No, I love that. I'm a very secretive writer, so I don't tell anyone what I'm writing until I finish the book. Nobody, my agents, my publishers, I adore them all, but nobody knows what's coming in until I hit send. And I still get really nervous when I do hit send and send in the book. But in terms of other people having their interpretations of it, I love that. I think as soon as I do hit send, the book doesn't belong to me anymore. As soon as I send it to my agents and my publishers, it belongs to all of us. And as soon as it goes out into the world, like this week on publication day, it belongs to every single one of you who reads it. Because we all will have a different reaction to the book. We're all going to picture Grady Green slightly differently. We'll all imagine the island slightly differently. And the stories and what happens to those characters will impact on us differently depending on our lives and our emotions and what's going on in our life right now. So that's why I just think stories are magic. You know, I sit in my shed with my dog, making up my crazy stories, and then these books travel all over the world, and I get to come and meet all of you, which is honestly the highlight of my year. I'm on my own for 50 weeks of the year, and then they let me out for 2 weeks. It's like being let out on good behaviour or something. So this is a real thrill. You know, I'm not even wearing my pyjamas. I brushed my hair and everything. So no, it's I think I love that about stories. I love that they belong to all of us when we read them. And I think that's what makes them so special, books in particular.
I think you're right. Now, you've noticed that more than once she has talked about being in her shed. There's another British author whose books I truly love called Ellie Griffiths, which is actually a pen name. It isn't her actual name. And whenever she and I Zoom, which we've done for every one of her books, she's in her garden shed, which is what she calls her office, although it actually is a pretty posh garden shed. So what's your shed really like? Is that just shed is like a catchword for something?
Yes, there's not much going on where I write. I remember Stephen King saying that it's best to have a small desk and it's best to be facing a wall because then you've got no distractions. Then you're just staring at your laptop and you're just doing your writing. But I think staring at a wall isn't as fun as, I would like life to be. So next to my desk I have a giant Alice in Wonderland mural. Bigger than I am, which is just to remind me every morning, every day when I go to work that it's okay to disappear down the rabbit hole. That's part of my job, but also I think in real life we all need to dive down the rabbit hole from time to time. It's a much safer, happier, more fun place to be.
Well, I ask that because most Americans, when they hear the word shed, think that's where the lawnmower is, So, we are truly two countries divided by a common language, as they often say. And I do think, that it's important to kind of clarify shed, see how that goes.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that you have another book in the works that you don't want to tell us about other than you're actually working on it.
It's done. Yes, I know. Thank you. I'm chuffed to bits myself. Oh, chuffed to bits means I'm happy. I remember being sent a book cover once by my American publishers. They come up with all these designs and they send you the book cover. And it's one of the most exciting emails of the year, actually, to see the cover come to life. And it was late at night because of the time difference. So I was in bed, really excited to see this cover, but about to go to sleep. So I replied quite quickly and just said, I'm chuffed to bits. They had a meeting about it. They were like, is she ill? Is she in pain? It just means I'm happy, just to clarify. No, I finished the next book. It was a well-behaved book, the next one.
Not a naughty book.
Yes, I feel like I was due one of those. Not quite as well-behaved as his and hers. Took a bit longer than 3 months, but it was a pure delight to write. I'm very excited about it. It'll be out this time next year, so not too long to wait for the next story. What can I tell you? It's very dark, probably not a surprise. Very twisty, probably not a surprise. My agent in the UK, who is possibly one of the busiest people on the planet, when I hit send, when I was brave enough to hit send, said, I know how scared you get when you send in the books. I'm going to try and read it as soon as I can, but just to warn you, things are crazy busy this week. Less than 24 hours later, I was in my kitchen doing normal things, catching up on all the non-writery things, and my phone rang, and it was my agent. And I thought, he can't possibly have read the book yet. And I answered the phone. I said, what do you want? Because you can't possibly have read the book yet. And he said, I have. And he said, I read the opening chapter, and then I asked my assistant to cancel my meetings. Then I went home and I ignored my family, and I couldn't put it down. So for me, that's having kept the book a secret for a very long time, to hand it in and have that reaction from my agent and from everyone else who's read it so far. I'm really excited about it. But for today, I'm more excited about Beautiful Ugly, because that's what we're here to talk about. But yes, there's another one on the way very, very soon. Thank you. I'm excited too.
So you all should be excited that it's done, and she will probably be out in January, because Scottsdale is a pretty big lure to authors who live in England in January, right?
Well, yes. I mean, I came from St. Louis. It was covered in snow. And then I arrived here, and I melted a little bit when I got off the plane. So this is lovely. We don't see much sun in England. I should move here. It's fantastic.
No, but, the thing is that book tours can be interrupted by weather. And it's fairly rare that we have a weather incident. I'm not saying that it won't happen probably tonight now that I opened my mouth. But,
Oh, no. Imagine if we all got trapped here. Wouldn't that be terrible?
Terrible.
In this beautiful bookshop.
Do you know, a couple of times there have been like plane strikes or something, and authors have been trapped at the Valley Ho and all, and they say, yay, don't have to go out any further, hang around, we have lunch, they tour the Grand Canyon, whatever, Arizona is really, if this were July, this would be a whole different conversation. It really would.
I was here once, I think in September.
Yes, well, that was after San Diego.
There was a heat warning, and I wasn't supposed to leave my hotel room, but I did because I like to explore.
We go from our air-conditioned rooms to our air-conditioned car to an air-conditioned bookstore. That's how it works. And, I grew up in Chicago when I can remember they closed school when it was like 25 below zero when I was a kid, because I was born in 1940 before there were, any checks on whatever it all is. And I think it's miraculous that I look at a palm tree every day in my backyard, and I think I'm on vacation. I really do. And our cactus, our gorgeous saguaro, if you've looked at the Instagram, they send a lift truck to wind the lights all the way, because the saguaro is like 25 feet tall, and they wind lights all the way around it. It is so gorgeous, and I think, how did I get here? How am I so lucky?
It's beautiful here. It's beautiful.
It really is, different, but I love it. So, anything else you'd like to say, or should we let the audience ask questions?
Oh, yes. No, audience questions.
All
I
right,
like those.
so you get to pick.
Me? I pick.
Raise your hand.
Oh, not me. Hello.
So we already talked a lot about the difference of words between the UK and the US. So is there a US version of a book and then the UK version of the book, or are they the same?
Previously, really good question. I've had different versions of the book. For this particular version, I think everyone has the same version inside, so all the words the same. And also, for the first time ever in my career, everyone has the same cover. So normally there's a US cover and there's a UK cover. But I think the design for this cover was so beautiful, and this came first, the American cover, that everyone else wanted the same one. So this is the cover in the UK, this is the cover in India, this is the cover in Australia, this is the cover everywhere for this one. So no, you're all reading the same one everywhere this time, which is fun for me.
So it's the same vocabulary is what you're saying. So
Yes.
chuffed, in case anybody
Yep,
is chuffed.
yep.
We also know how to do
Yep.
that. You know, I can remember years ago when Harry Potter first came out, and a bookstore like ours can't compete with the giant discounters now. So I thought we were going to sell like no Harry Potter books and all. And then all of a sudden we started getting requests from people who want to know if we could bring in the English edition, because we do that. We have a bookstore in London. Alice knows about it, and whatever, because it's the original vocabulary. And people felt like, you know, they could actually translate jumper into sweater.
Yes.
And so we made a killing on
Sidewalks
the
and
English
pavements.
Harry Potter while the American was selling along. And I thought that was wonderful. But I'm wondering if there's an assumption maybe that people are more literate in Brit speak now. Maybe not.
I think these days we all consume stories in so many different ways, don't we? But we watch so many TV shows where we all hear these different slight variations in our languages. You know, if I say pavement, I'm sure you know I mean sidewalk. So I think it's changing. I think we now have this kind of communal language where there'll be little bits of Americanisms, little bits of Britishisms, and it'll all just kind of meld into one, and we all know what we're trying to say, so it's okay.
Even the French say okay, you know.
Even
so
the French.
Even the French. Another question?
Hi.
Hello.
As a mystery writer, do you enjoy reading other mysteries? And if so, who do you enjoy reading, or who inspires you the most?
Great question. Yes, I do. I've always been a bookworm. As a child, I think I hid inside stories by reading them, and now I hide inside stories by writing them and reading them. I have so many favourites. I feel like we're living in a golden age of crime and thrillers, actually. I love Lisa Jewell. We share an agent, so I get to read her books early every year, which is honestly like a really big perk of my job. I think my favourite book last year was All the Colours of the Dark by Chris Whitaker, which I'm sure you've had here too. I thought that was an absolute masterpiece. So, yeah, I think there are lots of people out there to read, which makes me happy, and I gobble their books up every year.
Exactly.
You can run around there.
I don't mind. Hi. So this book is written from the male perspective, which from what I can remember, none of your books really have been focused on the male perspective. So how was that? Why did you choose that?
You've been here before, haven't you? Yes, I recognise you. That's what I said. It's like coming home to see family when I come here. It's brilliant. Oh no, the answer to this question makes me sad now because you've asked it, and I like you so much. But I think writing men is actually quite easy. You just remove the logic. So yes, I had a lot of fun writing Grady Green. I enjoyed it.
What usually helps you to get out of creative ruts if you're like, I am stuck, I cannot get out?
I'm really lucky that doesn't really happen to me too often. On the occasions that it has happened to me, normally my agent is the one who will just say, no, everything's fine, just go and write the next book, everything's okay. But if I do get stuck, I find the secret to getting out of that is a Kit Kat. So I have a jar of Lucky Kit Kats on my desk, just in front of the Alice in Wonderland mural on the wall. But at home we have 2-finger Kit Kats. Whenever I come here, I see these giant 6-finger Kit Kats. So I always wonder, if I lived in America, I could probably write twice as many books. But
Or
yes.
you could weigh twice as much.
Yes,
No.
like one of those two options. So yes, Kit Kats are the answer. Yes.
When you are developing your characters, do you have any tips that you like to give to aspiring to be published authors about character development?
Just go inside the book is what I tend to do. And in terms of explaining that, sometimes when I'm writing a first draft, I really don't leave home very much. So I really do only come out for 2 weeks of the year to do tour. And then I just disappear inside the book, and I spend as much time writing as I can. But I tend to think about the characters obsessively. And it's like being in love. And I don't mean old married love. I mean young, obsessive, slightly cuckoo crazy love. Where you just think about them all the time. So if I'm in a restaurant, I end up accidentally ordering what they might like, and then my food will arrive, and I'll think, but I don't even like mushrooms. Or I'll be driving, and if I'm writing an angry character, I remember once writing this very, very angry character a few years ago, and I'm a very safe driver. I stick below the speed limit. I check my mirrors. I do all the things you're supposed to do. Somebody cut me up when I was writing someone angry, and I hooted my horn. I didn't even know where the horn was before then. My fingers made some very rude gestures, which I won't do in front of all of you good people, and foul language came out of my mouth, and it was quite interesting because it was just the character I was writing. So let yourself go inside their head. Buy jumpers that they would buy and open your wardrobe 6 months later and go, what is this ugly thing? Just let yourself disappear inside them and walk in their shoes for a little bit. I think that's the best thing to do. Basically, the answer is let yourself go crazy. That's the way. Yes.
Based on you mentioned earlier the map that you drew, and you mentioned fantasy. Is there another genre that you would write in? Maybe fantasy or a thriller or sci-fi like this, different?
Another great question. I have always known quite far ahead what I want to write. So Beautiful Ugly is book 7 for me, but I know up to book 13. So I know it's very loud inside my head. It's all these voices whispering all of the time. So I can tell you that everything up until book 10 is very similar to what I've been writing now, dark and twisty. Book 11, secrets. There might be something a smidgen different for that one. And if not, I'm going to switch it with book 13. This means nothing to you because I'm not telling you what the books are. But it all makes sense in my head. So one day, maybe.
Not a spoiler, but towards the end of this book, Grady mentioned that he had a hidden message at the beginning of the book he publishes. I was curious if you hide any messages in your books or if there are any hidden Easter eggs in them.
I am so glad that you asked this question because I've realized that so far not everyone has found it. So in the book, look at someone in the front row. She has. In this book, Grady talks about how in his book he hides a secret message within the pages. So on the first letter, the first word of each chapter for 14 chapters spells it out. I did the same thing. So when you're reading, don't spoil it for yourself till you get to the end of the story. But then if you go back to the start, each of the first words of the first few chapters spells out something secret. I'm so excited for you all to find it now. But read the story first. Read the story first.
So it's going to be just like your agent. You're all going to rush home. You're going to blow off your family. You're going to cancel dinner. And you're going to stay up plotting to read.
And then my work here is done. Hurrah.
So I've got
you.
somebody from Italy on Facebook wanting to know Stefania.
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 Buonasera.
She, we've got an international audience. We've got Italy, we've got Brisbane, we've got, England.
Amazing.
We've got people watching all
Hello.
over. So there are Stefania was curious about what made you decide to focus on getting in deep psychologically with marriage because it's such a complicated relationship. And what did you get out of analyzing and dissecting people in marriages?
It's such a good question. Thank you. It's interesting because I've written about a few unhappy marriages in my books, including in Rock, Paper, Scissors, which is about a very unhappy marriage. And the thing is, I'm actually very happily married. We've been together for 20 years. He's the best. He's my best friend and the best husband. But the person I worry about most is actually my mother-in-law, because every year these books come out, and then she reads about these unhappily married people with a black Labrador. We have a black Labrador. One of the characters might be an author. I'm an author. They travel to Scotland. We go to Scotland every year. So every year on publication day in the UK, I get a phone call from my mother-in-law saying, "Is my son okay?" I don't know what makes me write about unhappy marriages. I think I know so many people, unfortunately, who haven't had the best marriages. You know, you reach the age I'm at, a lot of your friends actually aren't together with the person they used to be together with. And so I suppose I'm fascinated with all relationships in that way, and all those conflicts within relationships, which make life so challenging sometimes. So I suppose I like to explore that and put my characters in those slightly tricky situations and see what happens to them.
So I have a question.
Oh.
Are you plot first or character first?
All of my stories tend to happen at around 3 o'clock in the morning, which again is really fun for my husband. So he tends to get woken up by, I'm not great at technology, so I forget to do the silent thing on my phone. So around 3 o'clock, he'll hear the tappity tickety tappity tickety tap. And those ideas tend to be a character that I might fall in love with. Occasionally a twist has actually woken me up in the night. But for example, with Sometimes I Lie, I woke up at almost 3 o'clock in the morning on the dot. And I jumped out of bed, and I had this story idea. And I wrote down what I could remember from basically my dream. And that was that her name was Amber Reynolds, and that there were 3 things I could definitely remember. 1, that she was in a coma. 2, her husband didn't love her anymore. And 3, sometimes she lied. And that became the opening of the book, and that turned into Sometimes I Lie. So yes, it tends to be a character that I know something about that I fall in love with, or a big twist that I get really excited about.
Hi.
Hello.
So you said Daisy Darker took you about 5 years, right? What was your inspiration for it?
I think Daisy was another 3 a.m. book. It was just this story that just grew from nowhere. I live very close to Cornwall these days, so the place where Daisy is set in my head, I wish it was real, but it isn't. But the beach where it's located, I go there every year. You know, at least once a year I go there. So every time I would visit this secluded corner of Cornwall, I'd be picturing the Darker family. And it was this obsession that just grew. A bit like I said earlier about falling in love, but not in a healthy way. You just think about the characters. I kept thinking about this slightly messed up family and everything that was going on this secluded tidal island for an 80th birthday. And that's how it happens to me, really. I tend to think about the stories for at least a year or 2 before I write them. So once I sit down to write them, I know them better than I know my own family.
Is that unnerving for your husband?
Yes. I mean, the more I talk about it, the more I feel sorry for him. But yes, I think, sometimes he's always my first reader. And I'm sure every time he reads one of these very dark books, he just thinks, who are you? Who did I marry?
I'm stirring this up for dinner conversation. Love it. So we have time for a couple more questions. Who we got?
Yeah, I have a process question. As I was reading, when there'd be a twist, then I'd go back and see how I could have missed the twist. And I'm wondering what the writing process is on that to keep all of those small, intricate details straight, but not give it away so quickly.
It's a tricky one. Thank you. I try so hard with the twist. That's my favorite bit because I love reading them so much. I tend to plan everything out on a giant white board, so it looks like the work of a madwoman. But it's huge. It has magnets. There are different coloured cards as I'm plotting. The different cards will be for the chapters and for the characters. And then I can see the whole story in one place, and that's really important for me. I know other authors make it up as they go along. I would find that so stressful. You know, I'd spend the whole time worrying about getting lost instead of enjoying the journey. So I think that's how I do it. I make it so big that I can see everything in one place, so I can see the pattern of the story in one place all at once, and that helps me to know when to drop those little seeds or when to leave a few breadcrumbs for readers to find.
So I can tell you, having interviewed hundreds, probably thousands by now, of authors over 35 years, it's not a transferable skill. It's not a transferable process. Every single creative person has a process that works for them, but it's not likely to work for you. And I've never figured out how people do it, but I think what happens is authors are a little bit superstitious. If it worked the first time, there's a tendency to stick with it.
Yes,
is that true?
I'm absolutely a creature of habit. I do everything the same way every year forever. I've got all my strange little traditions. So after I've made the board,
Right.
I call it board day. It's like a ceremony in my house, board day. I should come up with a more fun title for it, really. And then after that is champagne afternoon, which sounds more fun than it is because I don't actually drink the champagne. I buy a very nice bottle of champagne and I put it in my fridge and I write on it the date and I write on it the book number. So this would have been book 7. But I'm not allowed to drink it until I've handed it in and my agent has read the book and has told me that I haven't lost my marbles and it's a good book and we should publish it. So for a whole year, I open that fridge every day and I think, oh, not yet, not yet. But I think it makes it all the sweeter when I do get to drink it and celebrate.
Hi, I
Hello.
do a lot of audiobooks, and I feel like narrators can totally like make or break a book for me. So I love Stephanie Racine. Like, she's one of my favorites.
She's
So
terrific.
as an author, like, how much say do you have in who your narrators are, and then, like, how did you choose her?
I have a lot of say in the audiobooks. It's one of my favourite parts of the process because it's the first time I hear them come to life. It's incredible. And with Stephanie, I remember I got sent maybe 3 or 4 auditions for Sometimes I Lie, and for me it was easily going to be her. She just captured Amber Reynolds, and because I'm a creature of habit, as we've established, I tend to have the same people for all my audiobooks. So Richard Armitage has done this one for me, but he also did his and hers as well. So yeah, I tend to just do the same people all the time. And I remember listening to Richard Armitage record the opening of Beautiful Ugly, and I cried because he was just so perfect at it, and he really captured Grady's voice, and it was just terrific. But also on this particular book, they've done all these little added extras, so you can hear the sound of the sea, you can hear crackling walkie-talkies, you can hear all sorts of little special effects, and Richard does about 20 different voices, so you feel like you've got a full cast. So no, I really enjoy the audiobooks. It's one of my favourite parts.
So it's so cool that you say Richard Armitage, because I actually got to debut Richard Armitage's first novel, which he wrote, was it last year or the year before? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, Geneva, right. And I'm trying to remember. I think it was I don't think he was actually here. I think he was in New York and we did it on Zoom. And
He's
he signed books
fantastic,
for
yeah.
us. But I thought, that maybe reading all these books inspired him to write one of his own. It was a fairly complicated plot. Right, a thriller.
I enjoyed it. It was
yeah,
good.
me too. Set in, but because he's already famous, the book did extremely well because he had lots of fans, that were willing to take a chance. It's very hard to introduce a book to an audience. You don't know who this person is. You have no idea if you're really going to like the book and all, and it's oftentimes a tough sell. But he already had a big audience, and so people were willing to dive in. I hope he's going to write another book.
I think he is. I think there is a second book on the way, which is great news because the first one was really good.
Yeah. So if you find a book, if you like his narration, look for Geneva, the book, and see what you think of it as an author, not just not an actor. Sorry. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't
Yeah, he
have
did.
time to listen to audiobooks, so it's a whole blank world for me, for sure. Anybody else? Did we question you out? All right. Well, this has been, did I see? No, you're scratching. Okay. Thank you all very much for your patience, for your being crowded. It's hard to sit in these chairs for more than an hour, and it's even harder to stand up. So I think our timing is great. Let's give Alice a round of
Thank
applause
you.
for coming to
Thank
see
you
us.
so much. This
And
has
now-
been completely amazing, and I wonder, can I get a photo
You
of you
can,
all?
but can you wait just a minute? Because
oh,
I'm going to
no,
give
no,
away.
I want to
I'm
do it
going to
straight
give
away,
away
yes.
a book.
Oh, okay.
I'm in the rhythm of giving away this book, so let's do that. John, are we in the 70s? Oh my God, we went up to 86. Okay, so this is a word. Do you know whether she calls it Gillian or Jillian? Is it Jillian? Okay. She follows me on Instagram because she likes my cactus. I even took an entire